Welcome. Wonderful to see you all here. Let's start with a little prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Direct, O Lord, we beseech Thee, all our actions by your holy inspirations. Carry them forward by your gracious assistance, that our every prayer and work may begin in you, and through you be happily completed. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, first you might be wondering why there's a note card and a pen on the seats. Those are for questions. We're going to hold the questions until after Mr. Chris O'Leary gives his talk. At that point, then we'll be happy to take questions and have discussion. I first got to know our guest of honor, Mr. Chris O'Leary, as a tweeter, so to speak.
Tweet, not tweet.
not as a twit, but as a tweeter. In 2018, we Catholics became aware in a new way of the stunning dishonesty at work among leaders of our church when it comes to sexual abuse. And the official Catholic organs of communication, the journalists, Catholic journalists, were not pushing the hard questions at all. And I was looking for the truth from somebody, and I found Chris on Twitter. He had just started communicating that way. He's had the courage to present his story to the world in the form of audio recordings available on the internet. Anybody know what that's called? That's called a podcast. There we go. And he draws you right into all the pain and confusion involved in having been sexually abused as a child by a Catholic priest. He draws you right into that without any bluster or agenda or axe to grind. He just calmly explains what it has been like to try to understand what he has suffered and to try to express the trauma to the powers that be in the church, only to be basically left bleeding by the side of the road. In spite of it all, I think that Chris loves the church as much as anybody I know, because he loves the church enough to tell the truth about how messed up this whole situation is. And that takes true love. Chris is a hero and a celebrity to me, and we are very honored and blessed to have him here to speak to us. Mr. Chris O'Leary.
All right, make sure this is on.
Yes.
It's on. He can fail the case. First, one thing that struck me about this and that's interesting about this is how this has an early church 2,000 years ago kind of feel, where it's almost a rebel alliance of people who aren't necessarily sanctioned by the official church, and in some cases are persecuted by the official church. And I think that's really cool. This is ownership of the spirit and religion. And I can tell you, I wish this kind of stuff, I wish you all were in St. Louis, because this is not how it is in St. Louis. We don't have a Father Mark. There's one diocesan priest who will talk to me. Nobody else will even look at me, literally. I don't know if they're under order or they just understand that nobody's to engage with him. So, which is no fun at all. All right, so let me ask a couple questions. How many of y'all are nervous about the worst sex abuse stuff, are a little afraid of the worst stuff? Anybody? Show of hands. Okay, okay, all right, right. Does anybody know someone who didn't come because of the really gross, worst stuff? Okay, right. So I'm gonna try to stay at a really high level as much as I can. I'm gonna go right up to the edge of where the worst stuff was happening, and then just kind of wave my hands and say, and here's where some bad stuff happened. I've done some polling on the internet, and it seems like people are afraid of being hit in the face with the worst stuff, so I'm going to stay away from the worst stuff. But understand, it was everything happened. All the worst stuff happened to me and to other guys. I can talk about it, I choose not to because you don't want to hear it and I don't want to talk about it. But I remember everything leading up to the worst stuff, and I have recovered some of, most of the worst stuff to know what happened. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So, my name is Chris O'Leary. I'm a survivor, was sexually exploited, abused, assaulted, raped by a priest named Father Valentine at the Church of the Immaculata in the late 70s and early 80s in the Archdiocese of St. Louis, literally like 41 years ago to the weekend. So one of the questions you would ask is, where were your parents? My parents were at the Greenbrier. I don't know what direction that is, but that's like an hour, My parents were at the Greenbrier. They had a convention. I was at home when the worst stuff happened. I was at home with a babysitter with my brothers, and never fail, my parents would leave town, and then on Monday, I would get a call from Father Valentine. Hey Chris, you want to come up and I've got some special stuff for you. Special training is how I remember it. I'll get into that, but that was how it was sold, and and it's an important question of where were your parents. My parents were at the Greenbrier primarily, although for the earlier stuff, they were dropping me off at the rectory, and my mom thought that the rectory was the safest place a kid could be. No safer place. And it was an honor to be invited there. That's how it was. I blank out a little bit, so I've got this. I'm in addition to all this stuff, I'm also dealing with, I'm 3 years post-concussion syndrome, so I was in a car accident 3 years ago, so I go blank. Plus, I have a part inside of me I call the 11-year-old, which doesn't like to talk about this stuff. And he's making me sweat. I'll be okay. But the 11-year-old likes to blank out my memory, so I have kind of keywords on this so I can remember stuff. So that was basically 4th grade through 7th grade at Immaculata. 8th grade, he left. I didn't know why, but I felt different. And 8th grade for me was really great. And then I went to St. Louis University High School, a Jesuit high school, and other stuff happened there. Not the worst stuff, but basically the locker rooms were unsupervised. And there were certain Jesuits who liked to watch guys shower. And the showers, it was just an open room, 4 shower heads. And there was a bench there and people would sit and watch. So I took 1 shower at St. Louis U High, and then I was done. Because I had that feeling of eyes on me, just, tearing me apart. And that basically ruined me for all of high school. You want to talk about triggered and that kind of word, that's what happened. And it's weird because it's only been in the past year or so that I've really kind of, and this is some conversations Dale and I've had, how does that work? Well, I can tell you, it's only been a year or so ago that I realized just how deeply my single issue high experience affected me. From conversations with another survivor. And it's really funny, I don't know how many times I thought after talking to him, he was abused basically in his first confession, face-to-face confession, 7 or 8 years old. And he was just devastated academically. I would talk to him, and a number of times I would say to myself, God, I'm glad that never happened to me. At least that never happened to me. I was never academically devastated. I failed typing first quarter freshman year because I was so freaked out by what happened in the shower. I'm a very smart guy. I graduated with like a 3.1 or something. Thank God for the SAT because I popped a 700 verbal, which is enough for one school in Texas to take a shot at me. So I got into college and did very well there. 3.6, 3.7, lots of A's, that kind of stuff. Although being in Texas was, made a huge difference. And then things got really bad. What I call the abuse of the abused, which I believe was related to my friend the Cardinal. You know him as Timothy Cardinal Dolan, the Archbishop of New York. I knew him as Father Dolan. Great guy, great friend of mine, or so I thought. So the reason I'm here with Father Mark is that he's doing stuff here and now that the people at Immaculata didn't do. He's refusing to be silent. He's refusing to enable. I think it's great that you guys are supporting him because it's hard as hell to do because I know. He's speaking up and he's speaking out for survivors, and he may be literally the only priest in the entire United States who's doing what he's doing, which takes balls, But it's exactly what Jesus Christ did, and he's modeling the example of Jesus Christ. Same thing I did. If you look at Jesus Christ, he'll tell you what to do. I did it. I'm trying to do it. I think Father Mark is doing it. So it's great that you guys are supporting him, and I appreciate your being here to listen to me and to the other survivors for taking that seriously. And one of the things that Father Mark has gotten in trouble for is refusing to enable, and that includes the Pope. So I don't know if you know all this, but there's a law passed 2 years ago called Vos Estis Lux Mundi. You are the light of the world, which came out after the February 2019 Sex Abuse Summit. In Vos Estis is Article 5, which lays out a Bill of Rights for survivors, which basically says if you're a survivor, this is what you can expect. This is what the church will do for you as a survivor. You can look it up on the internet, Google Vos Estis. My Archdiocese of St. Louis, despite Vos Estis, will do nothing to help me before or after Vos Estis. I've written 10 letters to the Pope letting him know that the Archdiocese of St. Louis is not following and enforcing Vos Estis Lux Mundi. Never heard anything back. Cardinal Sean O'Malley, who I had some hope for, I emailed him in July of 2019 or so. Yeah, I'm getting worked up, so let me move this a little bit. July 2019, I sent an email to Cardinal O'Malley. He sent me back at the end of July a nice flowering letter on his stationery letterhead and everything. Oh, we care so much about survivors. I'm gonna personally take your letters, the letters you sent me, and I'm gonna place them on the desk of the Pope when I'm in Rome in September 2019. I've heard nothing since. It's all a sham. It's a fraud. To not say that is to enable. The reason I'm here, the reason I'm appreciative of Father Mark is he refuses to enable. I refuse to enable. He refuses to enable. What Catholics need to do is refuse to enable. It's enabling is how kids get abused. Enabling is what happened. So in the military, there's this idea that you have to follow orders in the military. Now, you only have to follow lawful orders in the military. You don't have to obey an illegal or immoral order. In my opinion, Father Mark has been given at least immoral, if not illegal, orders. He refuses to do that. That sets me off because, so to Immaculata, literally within the first week of Father Valentine being there, this would be August of '77. Mrs. Glarner, who ran the after-school program, goes to Sister Helen, just walks from him. So it's basically, you've got the gym, which is the old church, and then the school. She just walks the 20 feet from the gym to the school. Goes to Sister Helen. There's something wrong with this Valentine guy. This is within literally days of his showing up. There's something wrong with this Valentine guy. This guy is not right. The way he dresses, the way he acts, the way he interacts with the kids, it's not right. So that's Mrs. Glarner, Sister Helen. Sisters of St. Joseph. She's since left the order. Sister Helen goes to Monsignor Flavin, our pastor, and tells him, okay, here's what the after-school program people are telling me about Father Valentine. And this is tough because everything could have been prevented if they had acted on this knowledge. They had this knowledge within the first week. So Sister Helen goes to Monsignor Flavin. And Monsignor Flavin tells Sister Helen, all right, where did this happen? Where did Mrs. Garner see this stuff? She saw it in the gym. Monsignor Flavin comes back and says, okay, if something happens in the school, that's your responsibility. Your area of responsibility is what happens in the school. Anything that happens anywhere else is my responsibility and not your concern. Yep. That's hard to process. And I thought Monsignor Flavin was an awesome guy. I love the guy. And I feel, so I actually saw him like 20 years ago before he died. And I had this really strange interaction with him at St. Clement. He was in retirement there. And I ended up talking to him. And his dynamic was so strange in terms of how he was interacting with me. I'm like 35 years old or something. He's like crying and stuff. And he's so happy and he's so grateful and everything. And I can only think that he thought, thank God these kids survived what I was ordered to put them through. And I can only assume that's what happened, is Monsignor Flavin was ordered to be quiet, just as he ordered Sister Helen to be quiet. And Father Mark has been given a comparable order and refuses to follow that order. That to me is awesome. Okay, so and the fact that they're talking about defrocking him for refusing to follow an immoral order is insane, especially given that my abuser, Father Leroy Valentine, was never defrocked. He was asked to resign in 2002, sitting on the shelf since 2002, permanently removed in 2013, named as an abuser. He sexually abused me in the Sacrament of Confession, which is excommunicable. Got at least one other guy that I know of who came forward and talked to the Archdiocese. He was never defrocked. So the fact that they're doing that they would even consider doing that to Father Mark is unconscionable to me. All right, so let's talk a little bit about church militant. I've gotten a lot of hits. There are a lot more people following me because of the church militant stuff. I just want to make sure my position on the gays is absolutely clear. I was 10, maybe 9, when what happened to me happened to me. Other people were 8 or maybe 7. That's not the gays. That's pedophilia. Some people said, yeah, but why does everything start at 11? And it's not, the younger kids don't really get abused. Well, for one thing, like I said, kids were getting abused at 7 or 8. Not that many, but in face-to-face confession, they were being abused. Second, kids only really became vulnerable when they turned 11, went into 5th grade, and started being altar servers. Why is it boys? There were no altar girls at Immaculata. It was only altar boys. So that's why all these cliffs start to peak at around 11 years old. That's when altar boys become altar servers. That's the reason why the peaks are the way they are. That's not the gays, that's pedophilia and other kind of sick stuff, but it's not pure homosexuality. I want to be really clear about that, because Church Militant has this whole homo predators term, and I don't like that term because that excludes what happened to me. So I was in Knoxville last night. That was not a coincidence. If y'all know what's going on in Knoxville and all the hubbub about Knoxville. Pillar Catholic has a lot of stuff on Knoxville. Bishop Sticka, the Bishop of Knoxville. You should Google that. I know for a fact that there are seminarians who will prey upon fellow seminarians and other people. I know that's a thing. It's bad. But homosexual predation is just as bad as the predation of children, is the predation of women. Abuse is abuse is abuse, and it's all bad. So let's not, I'm not making any exceptions. Let's just get rid of the whole, get rid of the whole thing. I'm not focused on children or whatever. I care about everybody. I care about adult men, seminarians, I care about kids, I care about women, nuns, that kind of stuff. It's all bad. It all needs to be dealt with. So that's my position on Church Militant. I want to make sure that kind of people understand that and understand what happened, because there's some narratives going on out there that bother me a little bit. So the big question for me is whether anything has changed. And after spending the night in Knoxville, that kind of reinforced the idea that I'm not really sure a lot of stuff has changed, because we were abused at a time when the seminaries were full and the rectories were full. St. Louis had Prep North and Prep South, minor seminaries, basically high schools. Then you had a full pipeline. They were ordaining 20, 30 guys a year, and all this stuff was happening. Now you've got the priest shortages, and guys are doubling and tripling up, that kind of stuff. That's a real concern for me, especially because it seems like they're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, or they're being less selective in terms of who they're ordaining and who they're pulling into the seminaries. That really scares me, and based on what I learned last night, I'm even more concerned about how things are going in the seminaries and who's getting pulled into the seminaries. So that's one of the things, as parents, as grandparents, you cannot trust the hierarchy. You probably can't trust your priests in terms of protecting your kids. You have to take personal responsibility for protecting your kids and the other kids around you. You cannot trust them. The incentives are still in place to cover everything up. The hierarchy is where allegations go to die. It's bad stuff. You, as Catholics, have to take responsibility for your kids and other kids. And that's a message I've tried to make clear in St. Louis. They kind of dodged the bullet, and people are like, well, we dodged the bullet, so we're good. And I'm like, there can still be predators in your parish. I mean, at the same time as the boys were being abused, the girls were being sexually abused by the crossing guard. And there was also a problem with the maintenance man. And there were I've heard allegations about our 7th grade teacher. My Twitter handle, Ivan Does Not, is a reference to a story our 7th grade teacher told us once. And I've heard allegations against it. There was something really, really wrong in Immaculata. And that goes to something that I call the program. I'll touch on in a little bit. All right, where are we time-wise? All right. right, so let me. All right, so now that I've depressed you, let me tell an upside story. Faith after abuse. This is going to start rough, but it's going to get better. So Easter 2014. I'm divorced, bankrupt. I've lost everything. I really started to get sick and lost my job in 2007. Really started to get bad in 2005, although as soon as Spotlight hit in 2002, I was reacting and I was having real problems. I became a nightmare as a husband and as a father. I thought none of it affected me, but it affected me. It's going to affect you. So by 2014, I'm divorced. Nominally, I had custody of the kids, but they really wanted to spend most of the time with their mom and the cousins and do that whole thing. And, you know, sometimes as a parent, you just have to bite the bullet and let them do what's best. But so what I would do is I would go to Easter Mass and try to catch a glimpse on him, because when I don't know if during Easter or Christmas Mass, I don't think I've ever sat down. I was always the guy who was standing in the back, either holding a kid or just standing up so that my mother-in-law could sit down or my father-in-law could sit down. So assume the altar's down there. I'm standing like right here, and there's a set of doors right here and a door frame. So I just kind of set myself up here, and the kids are right over there with their mom, and I can kind of watch over them and get a glimpse of them. So I'm kind of playing this game in my head of, okay, it's not that we're divorced and we're separated. I'm just standing in the back of the church like I used to. So I don't get so depressed, basically. And that game is going well. And I've played that game before on previous Easters and on Christmases. And then out of the left side of my eye, I see a guy come walking. And I'll bring up, and he's wearing, so this is a picture of me when I was a kid. And this is what we would wear. You'd have the black cassock and then the white surplice, the sheer curtainy kind of stuff over the top. And a guy comes walking up wearing this, which I haven't seen in 30 years, because at Mary Queen of Peace, my current parish, they wore the white owl robe kind of stuff. And there were more altar girls than altar boys. So I haven't seen someone in a getup like this in 30 years. And then he's got the incense with him too. And Mary Queen of Peace is not an incense parish. Immaculata, my first parish, was an incense parish. It was this huge space, and they would just fill up the whole space with incense. Boom, boom, boom. But Mary Queen of Peace was not like that. But so you have this guy walk over, and I'm sure you've heard the phrase triggered. So I don't know if I would call it a flashback or a visual disturbance or what. But suddenly, I'm getting hot and I'm getting woozy. So I start leaning up against the door frame, and every time I blink, my eye level jumps a foot. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm cycling between a 48-year-old man and an 11-year-old child. Every time I blink, my eye level jumps. It's not exactly a flashback, but it was pretty messed up, I'll tell you that. So I ended up having to bail out of there. And that's the last time I've ever been to Mass. I have been in a couple churches. So my daughter, they hold their choir recitals in the church, in the chapel. And where I sit, again, the altar's over there. So there's a door right here. And then there's a seat right here. So I'm as far back in the church as I can. Literally against the back wall of the church. That's as close as I can get to being in a church and all that kind of stuff. So I bail out of there and I go home. The night before, I had seen the movie The Passion of the Christ, starting at the part in the Garden of Gethsemane. So I go back home and I turn on the TV, And the Passion of the Christ is on starting up right at the beginning. So I watch it all the way through, and then I watch it all the way through again. And at that age, by that point in 2014, I'd been trying to get help, and I knew what happened. I knew a lot of what happened, and I'd been trying to get help for another 3 years, and really for 15 years. But I was getting frustrated, and I was trying to decide what to do and whether to give up. And then I realized, watching Jesus enter Jerusalem on Palm Sunday to a certain and known fate, and that was the crazy part. He knew what was going to happen. And I'm like, if Jesus Christ can do that, then I can do this. I can stick with this. And that's been my mantra ever since. I still haven't gone back to Mass. I can't stand it, But what that's done is that's emboldened me to kind of keep at this stuff, despite everything that, despite all the abuse of the abuse stuff. So then, where are we time-wise? 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay. So let me zip you through a little things to get to this picture. So 2017, Cardinal Law dies. Archbishop DiNardo issues a press release which says, if you're a survivor and you need help, contact your local diocesan victim assistance coordinator. I've been trying since 2011 to get help from the victim's assistance coordinator, was never contacted by, told the existence of, put in touch with, anything about an assistance coordinator. This is the USCCB is saying this stuff. I don't know what, this is before all the Pope stuff. So that sets me off, and I write my first piece, which is on Medium, which now is called Assistance Coordinators and Other Lies, which basically just kind of blows the whistle on the assistance coordinator sham. And long story short, in the Archdiocese of St. Louis, and I got this straight from, and if you listen to the podcast, I'll put this in the podcast. I met with my Archbishop March 26, 2019. I recorded it. I gave them 3 months to do any of the things that they promised. They didn't, so then I released the recording. In the recording, they told me that the only thing the Archdiocese of St. Louis will do for survivors is if you don't already have a therapist, they will give you the name of a therapist. That's it. That's it. Nothing else. And I've got that on tape. Now that was before Vos Estis, but I have no reason to believe that anything has changed since then. They never called me back after Vos Estis to say, hey Chris, we treated you so bad, now we're in the post-Vos Estis world. No, none of that happened. So I write this piece on assistance coordinators, and then I try to let the USCCB know that the Archdiocese of St. Louis isn't living up to the assistance coordinator promise. I do get a letter back from the Archdiocese of St. Louis, which kind of sort of admitted it. The exact language was, your claims were acknowledged. Which, if there are any lawyers in here, they'll tell you that means absolutely nothing. It's like when you get in an argument and someone says, I hear you. I don't agree with you, but I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Your claims were acknowledged. And that's not enough, and I'm thinking, so I've got this vision of Christ on the cross and this model of courage and love, and I'm like, they can't string me up on a cross, so let's just keep going at this, because I'm trying to figure out how much of this is a sham, how much of this is serious, and if I can expose this and press them hard enough, then maybe it will actually become a reality, and I can turn this into, a real promise, and they'll start living up to their promises. So then they call the cops on me. I've been nervous about people taking action against me, people taking things into their own hands. it put out some tweets that I intended and that were interpreted as my willingness to defend myself. I got a direct message from a guy who basically said, watch out, sometimes people will take things into their own hands. And that's actually what's happened to the guy in Knoxville that I saw. People have tried to take things into their own hands. I don't know whether people are stalking him and chasing him around, that kind of stuff. So I was afraid that that was going to happen. I put some tweets that basically said, if anyone wants to come after me at home, I have the capability to defend myself. And that's all I said. They reported that to the police and then the FBI as a terrorist threat, saying I had made terrorist threats against the Archdiocese of St. Louis. So then the next day, these two Shrewsbury cops show up, and they talk to me for an hour and a half, and they're really agitated. And I didn't actually hear the word, I didn't know what they were agitated about. I didn't find out about the exact terrorist threats term until like a year later. I was meeting with the cop, I found the police report, the cop was walking me out the building, and he's like, all right, I'm sorry to ask, but I gotta ask, why does the Shrewsbury report say terroristic threats? I'm like, oh, okay, that's why the Shrewsbury guys were so agitated, because someone said I had made terrorist threats. I didn't make terrorist threats. I just was trying to establish that I could defend myself. And so I had two Shrewsbury cops in my living room for an hour and a half. They were all agitated and upset. Turns out the Archdiocese, they went to the FBI, they reported me to the FBI and the police and all these different agencies. So we get this kind of rapidly escalating battle going on. Then the Pennsylvania grand jury report hits. That's in August. And then the church starts to get kind of contrite, so the Archdiocese of St. Louis, I think September 13, 2019, or might have been the 7th, doesn't matter, convened a massive reparation for the sex abuse crisis. There were lots of them around the country. So I didn't know what was going to happen. So I walked down to just kind of stand vigilant. I'm not protesting. I'm literally just standing there, and I'm holding two pictures. And these are the actual pictures, and if you want to see these afterwards, that's fine. Just please don't photograph these, because I have not blanked out the faces of the other guys. These are the actual photographs that I was holding. This guy I suspect was abused. I don't know about this guy. I've talked to this guy. His name's Peter Pfeiffer. His daughter's actually swimming in the Olympic trials, E.B. Pfeiffer. He has a show that I went on. If you go to chrisleary.com/sins, you can find the show of him and me talking about his experiences. His experience with Valentine was, Valentine told him that they were going to do a passion play, and Valentine needed to examine the candidates to play Jesus Christ, and he needed to have them take their shirts off at least, so he could run his hands up and over their bodies and make sure there weren't any blemishes, because if you're going to play the role of Jesus Christ, you can't have blemishes. This guy, he didn't come to Immaculata until older. One of the things that Valentine would do to get at people was he would wrestle with us, and his hand would slip, and he would grab you down there. He did that to this guy, and number shirt guy almost threw him across the room.
Good for him.
No, yeah. But that gets into kind of the abuse process. But so I'm standing there holding these two pictures in front of the mass of reparation, the mass of freaking reparation for the sex abuse crisis. And to their credit, two women who work for the Archdiocese of St. Louis did come up and talk to me, and they said, we don't like how things are being handled. And I just said thank you. Then a group of 3 nuns came by, not the order nuns. Any nun that's in a habit will completely ignore me. They're the worst. The order nuns are the worst. The short hair, comfortable shoes nuns, they're good. They were very nice. You know, the cop who was working security came up and said, you know, he just said a couple words to me. He did actually invite me in. I passed on that, but so I'm standing there, and then, so I'm like 60 feet from the doors of the cathedral basilica, standing 2 stairs down. There's a flight of stairs. I've got my toes against it, which is literally as close as I can get without them calling the cops on me, because I'm on the sidewalk. As long as I'm on the sidewalk, I'm okay. And basically, every available priest of the Archdiocese of St. Louis starts coming around the corner of the cathedral basilica across this top plaza and forming up in front of me. Like this distance from here to here is about 30 feet or so. And there are 100 priests all formed up in front of me and around and everything. And nobody will look at me. And y'all, I know some of y'all know what that's like. You know exactly what that's like. And the worst part was, I didn't recognize most of the priests, but I did recognize one. And he was standing basically right here. And he ends up, so I'm standing right there like 25 feet from him. And he looks, but he won't look down. He does this whole left-to-right scan across, and his eyes will never drop to meet mine. It's like I don't even exist. And that was a very, very, very difficult thing. But the thought that kept running through my head was, if Jesus Christ can do what he did, then I can do this. And I can tell you, this was no fun at all. My whole body was completely locked up. You know, I know that cops and military people, they have all these little tricks to keep your body from locking up if you're standing guard for several hours at a time. I didn't know about those. I was just completely tensed up, such that when I tried to walk, I actually fell down because every muscle in my body was locked up. Where are we time-wise? Close? Okay. Well, we can get to the other stuff. Let's just wrap up this portion. If people want to go into the details of or some level of detail about what happened, if you have interest in that, ask the question. If you don't, then let's not.
Speaking of bravery, just a second, Dick. Can everybody hear me? Okay. At the beginning, Chris said something about the Rebel Alliance, Star Wars aficionados here.
Yeah.
That's a phrase from Star Wars. And they're the good guys, right? What came through my mind was, well, they might have the Death Star, but the Force is with us.
Amen.
If you have a question for Chris or myself, write it down on the card. Dale and Judy are going to circulate collecting cards, and then we'll take a little time for questions. We're also going to circulate a basket. We are trying to run this operation of this series of talks, taking advantage of as much goodwill as we possibly can, but not everything about it is free. So if you have anything to offer, we'd be very grateful. It'll go solely towards covering the costs associated with having these talks. The next talk in the series is 4 weeks from tonight. Mr. Mark Bath and Mr. Richard Windman will come from New Orleans, Louisiana, to speak to us. So come back, mark your calendar for that, to come back. And anything you have to offer will help to take care of being able to bring them here. Okay. There's also a way to give online. It's on a flyer that was on the table.
I can take credit cards.
And Dale is also available to take credit cards at the end of the evening if you want to stop by and see. Okay. So go ahead and Judy's going to circulate the basket.
Dolan was at Immaculata from 76 to 79. Valentine was at Immaculata from 77 to 81. And then you've got Monsignor Flavin, our pastor, Sister Helen, and I think this is Sister Ruth. I think Sister Helen was just about taking over from Sister Ruth. So, just here's not me, but this kind of puts the key figures together. And I think the Archdiocese of St. Louis is terrified of this picture. So I tweet it like crazy. I'm trying to get a higher resolution version from my brother, but he's got to go through his files and everything. So, but just to, in case anyone has any questions, you can say you saw, here are the relevant photographs. And if you want to come up and look at these, that's fine. And I will take any question. I don't care. If you've got a question, I will answer any question. If you want to ask it afterwards, that's fine. But I try not to be embarrassed by any of this stuff. It happened. These are different. That's me. Yeah.
Okay, we got some excellent questions. I'm not sure we're going to have time for absolutely all of them. Thank you for the very thoughtful questions. Here comes question number one. Chris, what did your parents say to you when you told them about the abuse? Did they believe you?
Let me, because that's important, let me first say this. And this is hard. This is hard to say. This is hard to process. So my 4th grade teacher, so it started in 4th grade. Face-to-face confession, then we had a party in the rectory, a wrist and pizza party in the rectory. Apparently, within a short period of time, I started reacting to that and acting out. My 4th grade teacher went to my mom and said, "Something is up with Chris. What's the deal?" They never did anything about it. One of my therapists once asked me, "Okay, so what did your doctor say?" Like, what do you mean by doctor? My parents never took me to the doctor or a psychologist or anything, which is hard to process. So, my dad refuses to talk about it. I do think he believes me. He's helped me out financially. Okay, so here's something you should understand. I'm devastated financially. I'm living on about $10,000 a year. I try to make money through the internet, but I'm so constrained in terms of the PTSD and all that kind of stuff that there are real limits to what I can do. This is an effort to try to come out of this, although I was fighting cancer at the same time I was fighting the Archdiocese, which was a real womp. Malignant melanoma, thank God, 5 years. 3 years ago I was in a car accident, so I'm still dealing with headaches and post-concussion syndrome related to that, so that makes everything complicated. My dad is helping me out financially. I live with them. My dad's 89. My mom is in kind of like the mid stages of Alzheimer's, so that's actually kind of a blessing because I can do all this stuff, and my dad, rather than paying, the lawn guy pays me to mow the lawn, that kind of stuff. So I'm surviving, but I'm not thriving. My parents mostly did believe me. My mom especially, because and it's frustrating because she had been told some of this at various points during my childhood. I changed. Supposedly I went from like an extrovert, popular kid, athletic kid to an introvert. She knew that something happened, but she didn't know what. And my dad, as is his way, went to the library and tried to read about it and came to the conclusion that it wasn't a big deal. Which isn't easy. Take this stuff seriously. If you see pretty significant changes in your kids, your grandkids, or neighbor kids, whatever, apparently it was obvious I changed very dramatically. And a lot of this stuff was stuff that my mom always wondered about, but she didn't know. my parents were pretty good about that in terms of believing. Again, like I said, because I think they knew stuff down in their gut. So thank God I didn't have to deal with that. Some of the worst guys, some of the guys, I'm not in great shape, but I know one guy, this is the guy who was abused in first confession. He went right home, told his mom, and his mom's like, "You're never to speak of this again." And that's not the only person that I know of who had that happen. I know 2 guys at least that happened to. They immediately told their parents, and their parents like, "You're never to speak of this again." And those guys are messed up. It's not, if you see something, say something, talk to your doctor, their child psychologist, there are lots of resources out there.
Next question. Were you able to get counseling anywhere?
Okay, so first, I've seen like 13 psychologists over the years, all of which I've had to pay for. Although the last one was a Catholic counselor who ended up doing it for free. My dad isn't the greatest. He doesn't have a whole lot of patience. He wants to see results within a month, which it's not how it works. So I've had to pay for basically everything myself. And this is where Cardinal Dolan gets involved. So Spotlight, January 2002, early March 2002, my Spotlight happened. A lot of people, if you haven't seen the movie Spotlight, you should. It's good, it's not graphic. They're very high level with the gross stuff. It's more about trying to figure out what happened and how and why. I think a lot of people think that Spotlight was the end of the story. For me, it was really just kind of the beginning or the resurgence of the story. I immediately got screwed up by Spotlight, despite the fact that I went to the Archdiocese of St. Louis. So a New York Times piece ran March 3rd, 2002. I called KSDK, the circuit attorney, and I called the Archdiocese of St. Louis. KSDK didn't want to talk, but I didn't know whether I had enough to talk about. My memories were there was only one memory that was kind of questionable. The other memories I had were like the memories that made me feel special and cool, and this is amazing. And that's a secret, but it's a secret because it's so awesome. But so then I did call the Archdiocese of St. Louis. I was called back immediately by then Auxiliary Bishop Dolan. I told him 4 memories, face-to-face confession, the Risk Pizza Party, special training, and then a mud cave trip. And this is, all right, so to enabling, in the New York Times article, there is a description of a federal crime, a violation of the Mann Act, a transportation of a minor across state lines for illicit purposes. In the New York Times article, a federal crime is described. To my knowledge, nobody looked into it. That's the mud cave trip. But so I told Dolan those memories, and he immediately, without any investigation, told me, "I've known Father Valentine forever. We were at the seminary. We lived and worked together. I know he didn't do any of the things that he's accused of. I know he could never do anything to hurt a child." And that was good enough for me, because that was Bishop freaking Dolan, who obviously was going to be a big deal. Within a month, he was in Milwaukee. He did refer me to a psychologist, an independent psychologist who turned out to be the assistant coordinator for the Archdiocese of St. Louis. She told me my memories didn't mean anything, and I was just misinterpreting his intentions. I moved back, so I went to college in Texas, moved back to St. Louis. As soon as I committed to St. Louis in basically '98, I started having problems with depression. I did have problems with depression in grad school, saw a psychologist for depression. get back to St. Louis, have more problems with depression. Just something is weighing on me and I don't know what it is. But the one thing is, as of 2002, I knew for a fact that it was not sex abuse. I ruled out sex abuse. So I spent all this money and all this time, basically 10 years, 5 psychologists, going from psychologist to psychologist to psychologist, looking at adult ADHD, Asperger's syndrome, all this stuff. It was actually PTSD, but because Dolan told me nothing happened, I wasn't able to look into the real thing. So I ended up wasting $30,000 or $40,000 on therapy. Did see 2 psychologists when I started figuring out, because they had been trauma trained. The only problem with my most recent therapist is that she was Catholic and she was doing it for free, but she's a devout Catholic, so she had a real problem with a lot of the stuff that I was telling her about Dolan. She didn't believe it, or she had a hard time believing it. She had a hard time believing the stuff about the Archbishop, even though I had a freaking transcript of what he had told me. She still couldn't believe it, so that got into gaslighting. And she's telling me, oh, but he's a good man. And I'm like, well, just read the transcript. So I have gotten help, but it's expensive and I've run out of money, that kind of stuff. And again, the Archdiocese won't do anything. I am going to go back to the Archdiocese now with basically a printed out copy of Vos Estis and say, I'm here asserting my rights under Article 5 of Vos Estis Lux Mundi, and I'm going to have all my camera gear and my microphones and everything and just see what happens. I assume they're probably just going to call the cops and, just do their standard thing, but we'll see. So stay tuned, listen to the podcast.
Next question. Did the Archdiocese know about Father Valentine when they sent him to your parish?
Okay, so first rule of the internet is never read the comments. Especially Twitter. But I found some interesting thing in the comments. There's a guy named James Turner who published under his own name. Who was sexually exploited and abused by Father Valentine while Father Valentine was in the seminary. I don't know whether this is the high school minor seminary. Well, from the dates, actually, so they're two different people with 2 different allegations against Valentine. One in the minor seminary, which is high school, one in the major seminary, which is college. And all right. I don't know whether they knew about that or not. But this is a separate episode that I call the program, and this is the whole reason why I called the podcast Sacrificed. So in January 2020, I was Googling around and found a document on the website of my current parish, Mary Queen of Peace. And if you're internet savvy, you can find this document right now. mqpwg.org. In the right-hand corner is a link called Protect. In that link, there's a list of abusive priests who were stationed at Mary Queen of Peace. I found that document by looking for my abuser because he's on that list. The interesting thing about that list is the way the dates match up. Okay, so the narrative is that they didn't know about these guys. They didn't know about them until the 90s or something. This document is evidence that as of the 70s, they knew what was going on and they had put in place a program to manage, protect, whatever these guys. Because if you look at the dates, Mary Queen of Peace, 72, an abuser's there from 72 to 78. Another abuser comes in 78 and goes out in 81. Valentine goes in 81. So you've got three abusers back to back to back. It's almost as if there was a slot within the roster of that parish for an abuser. And I've heard of 2, maybe 3 parishes that were like that. The director, James Gunn, Guardians of the Galaxy, he was in one of those parishes, St. Joe, Manchester. The three parishes that, well, and this goes back to another story that I've heard. So we had this one priest, and he spoke like this, and it was really obvious that he had this kind of affected manner. So I once asked my dad about that. What's his deal? And my dad told me, Monsignor Flavin is good at working with troubled priests who have problems. And I had no idea what that meant. And I still don't know exactly what that meant. But now I wonder if that wasn't a bigger statement, a bigger reality. That there was something about Monsignor Flavin. And I don't know whether, my interpretation was that Monsignor Flavin was counseling these guys, but it could very well be, and this gets into the spotlight stuff, that these parishes were located in municipalities that had friendly police departments, mayors, chiefs of police, that kind of stuff. Again, this was a program that was in place by the mid to late 70s in St. Louis. So I don't know for sure, but it sure looks like they did. Like they knew what was going on, which
Okay, last question. How do I not enable?
speak up and out and talk and refuse to, don't go away, be a dame, be a broad. If they're not calling you a broad, you're probably not being sassy enough. Don't take no for an answer. Do your own investigation, take ownership of the kids. Do the opposite. Do the opposite of what our parents did. When they tell you to go away, dig in. Investigate, be curious, use the internet, be the B word. If they're not calling you the B word, you're probably not doing your job. This is primarily a problem with the bishops in the hierarchy. They are very arrogant. And they live in this isolated little world where everybody kisses their ass and everybody's nice to them and everybody's deferential to them. If you let them know that you know how it is and it's not going to be tolerated, that will send a message. That's why I think what you guys are doing is great, because you're not taking no for an answer. You're refusing to just go away, which is exactly what needs to be done. In St. Louis, nobody's doing anything. I'm terrified for the kids in St. Louis, because none of this stuff is happening. I'm going to try to make it happen, but even my friends on Facebook, nobody wants to engage, nobody wants to talk about it. They're all hoping that their kids are safe. I'm nervous for my nephews. I'm nervous for the kids of my high school classmates, because nobody's going up to Archbishop Brzezinski. A lot of times the bishop, after the bishop does a mass, he's going to stand there and he's expecting you to kiss the ring. If you take that opportunity to ask some pointed questions, ask them about Vos Estis. Ask them about the policy of the Archdiocese or the diocese in terms of survivors. Ask them exactly what you're doing in terms of survivors. And if you can, don't just listen to the bishops and what the policies are. If you can, talk to survivors, and hopefully survivors will go to you so then you can find out what the reality is of, okay, here's what the policy says, here's the reality for survivors. Because like I said, the Archdiocese of St. Louis looks great. They check all the boxes and everything. And you got Vos Estis backing everything up. The problem is that nobody's enforcing it. So you got to dig. You have to press them. It's a great question. I thank you for the question, and it kind of goes to the whole thing. And it's listen to my stories, take them to heart, listen to the podcast, and do the opposite of what my parents did and what all the people at Immaculata did. So, that's it.
Chris, we think you're pretty brave. And I, for one, think you all are pretty brave for coming out to listen to this and be a part of trying to live in the truth. There's peace in that. Just to amplify one thing Chris just said that reverberates in my mind over and over again when it comes to what the powers that be in the church say versus what they do. Chris referred to the year 2002. As I've mentioned many times, we old people remember that, right? Remember 2002 and how our church received this colossal black eye. I was wearing my Roman collar on Wisconsin Avenue. I was threatened in the street for good reason, really. And the bishops organized and proposed this long list of beautiful things that were going to solve the problem. And the person at the microphone was Theodore McCarrick. So we got to stop enabling these guys.
And I could, what I did, it was very scary. It was intimidating as hell. But if Jesus Christ can do what he did, then I knew that I could do this. And if you can take that mantra to heart, it'll benefit you not just in this, but in a lot of areas.
Amen. Thank you all very much for coming. Safe trip home, and we will see you again Sunday, July 25th, 5 p.m., same place, same good air conditioning will be running. And we'll have Mark Bath and Richard Whitman here to talk to us. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Thank you again, Chris.